Halfling, death is upon you.
The flames of war are upon you.
Why did you do that?
You promised to set him free.
And I did. I freed his wretched head from his miserable shoulders.
There was more the Orc could tell us.
There was nothing more he could tell me.
Backwards method is based on a ritualistic mystical system that's been employed by the Temple of the Four Orders for centuries. To fully understand the system, to get inside it, I reenacted the ceremony we interrupted at the crypt, with a few enhancements of my own. My journey took me somewhat further down the rabbit hole than I had intended, and though I dirtied my fluffy white tail, I've emerged.
Yeah. There's a chemical reaction. It shows there was a powerful singular thrust to the neck.
Hello and welcome to D6damage. I thought I would take an opportunity to introduce you to another one of my characters. The Elf Investigator I played got to a pretty high level. I think we hit level 16. And one of my favorite moments during the table in that campaign was getting hit with 20 d6 fire damage and ultimately taking only 5 points of damage out of it. This character did get disintegrated though. Anyway, I would say race and class are pretty obvious. For this character, you are going to want to be an elf and an investigator. The Investigator is a hybrid class, available in the Advanced Class Guide. It's a combination of a rogue and an alchemist. You get a lot of rogue precision damage, and you get alchemist formulas. This basically allows you to make potion-y type things, which allow you to cast spells mostly on yourself. And this class is one hell of a skill monkey. You get 6 ranks per level plus intelligence modifier, and you're going to want your intelligence modifier to be as high as possible. Now let's look at your race and some of the things you're going to get out of it. Elves get a +2 to their dexterity score and a +2 to their intelligence score, both of which are very, very important for this build. You are also going to be taking a -2 to your constitution, so I would recommend filling that hole, because this is a melee character. It's good not to be losing health every level. Elves get low light vision, elven immunities, so you are immune to sleep, both magical and non-magical, but you still have to spend hours in meditation, as resting. Also, elves have a very important feature to this build, weapon familiarity. That means elves are proficient with longbows, short swords, rapiers, and any weapon with elven in the name. This elven investigator is going to be using the elven curved blade as their primary weapon. An elven curved blade does 1d10 damage and has an 18 to 20 crit range. Now let's move on to the Investigator class features. Investigators get a D8 hit die. They have good reflex saves, good will saves, and poor fortitude saves. That was the cause for my disintegration, by the way. That and just poor dice rolls. Investigators are proficient with simple weapons plus hand crossbows, rapiers, saps, short bows, short swords, and sword canes. Not that you're going to be using any of that. Investigators are also proficient with light armor. Investigators get a class feature called alchemy. These are basically the spells of the class. You can create extracts just like an alchemist can, and you use the alchemist spell list. You're also going to need an alchemist formula book. You also gain a competency bonus on all your craft alchemy checks equal to your investigator level. Now into the real bread and butter of the build, inspiration. Inspiration is critical to this build, and having as much of it as possible. So, the best way to think about inspiration is, if you've seen the show Sherlock, it's kind of like the Mind Palace. You basically call on reserves of focus and knowledge in order to accomplish these incredible feats. You have an inspiration pool equal to half your investigator level plus your intelligence modifier, and it refreshes at the beginning of the day. Now let's talk about the elf favored class bonus for the investigator. For every 3 levels, you get an additional inspiration point. This, combined with your high intelligence modifier, should give you a fairly large pool of inspiration, which you're going to be using a lot in combat. but it also has uses outside of combat. You can, as a free action, expend 1 point of inspiration to add a d6 to certain skill checks. And there are also skill checks that you don't even need to expend inspiration on. You can just add a d6 because you want to. These are any knowledge, linguistics, or spellcraft checks. Inspiration can also be used on attack rolls. So, say you go to attack a creature and you don't get that good a roll on a d20. You can expend 2 inspiration points to add a d6 to that roll. You can also expend 2 points of inspiration to add a d6 to a saving throw that you've made if you don't like the results. Didn't save me from that disintegration, though. I got like a 1. Investigators also get the trap finding class feature, where you add half your level to find traps and disable device checks. Investigators also get a feature called poison lore. This makes it so that you can apply poison to a weapon without poisoning yourself, and it's easier for you to make poisons. You also get poison resistance. This increases your resistance to poison, obviously, and at a certain point you just become immune. Now, much like the rogue, which gets rogue talents, investigators get investigator talents. For this character build, your first investigator talent, which you get at level 3, should be expanded inspiration. What expanded inspiration means is you can add that free d6 to a larger number of skill checks. So, just have a free d6 to diplomacy, heal, perception, profession, and sense motive checks. Just cause you're super duper smart. Your 5th level investigator talent should be quick study. I'll get into what that means exactly in just a minute. Your 7th level investigator talent should be amazing inspiration. What that means is, instead of a d6, you now get to roll a d8 when spending an inspiration point on a skill check or attack roll. Finally, your 9th level investigator talent should be combat inspiration. That means instead of spending 2 inspiration points to add a d8 to an attack roll or a saving throw, you only need to spend 1 point. The next class feature the investigator gets is Keen Recollection. This means you can attempt all knowledge checks untrained. You also get Trap Sense. This gives you a +1 bonus to your reflex saves, and a dodge bonus against traps. Now we get into another really important feature to the combat effectiveness of this build, studied combat. And this is where the quick study feature comes in. An investigator can, as a move action, study an opponent in combat. So that means starting at 4th level, after you've studied your target, you can add half your investigator level as a bonus to attack and damage rolls. There is a little bit of a downside to this. Anything which is immune to precision damage is going to be immune to that. So you're not going to be precise striking and ooze. This effect lasts for a number of rounds equal to your intelligence modifier. And you can only have 1 target studied at a time. You gotta focus, you know? Can't get distracted. Now remember that quick study investigator talent I mentioned? What that does is it reduces the time needed to study a target from a move action to a swift action. You will also at 4th level receive the Studied Strike class feature. This basically works a lot like the rogue sneak attack, but with more restrictions. What you can do as a free action after hitting an opponent is basically choose to forego your remaining rounds of studying an opponent to do increased damage. At 4th level, it's 1d6. At 6th level, it's 2d6, and it continues to scale from there, finally topping out at 9d6 at level 20. Now let's move on to the feats which I recommend for this character. Level 1 should be fairly obvious. You're going to want Weapon Finesse. This will allow you to add your dexterity to hit with your Elven Curved Blade. Obviously, you're going to want your dexterity as high as possible. The 2 core attributes of this character build are dexterity and intelligence. The higher you can get them, the better. Your 3rd level feat should be Dodge. This gives you a +1 dodge bonus to AC, and, more importantly, it's a prereq. Your 5th level feat should be Mobility. This gives you a +4 AC bonus against attacks of opportunity made while moving. Your 7th level feat should be Spring Attack. What this means is, as a full round action, you can move up to your speed and make a single melee attack against an opponent. Unfortunately, what this means is you can't Vital Strike. This attack does not provoke attacks of opportunity, by the way. And, after you've made that attack, you may continue your movement until you've exhausted your move speed. The only restriction to this is you have to move 10 feet beforehand. and you can't use it to attack a foe adjacent to you at the start of your turn. For your 9th level feat, there are a bunch of interesting things you could take. You obviously can't go wrong with extra inspiration. You could also try Wind Stance. This means that if you move, you get a 20% miss chance against ranged attacks. That has to be more than 5 feet, so you can't just take a 5-foot step and say, hey, roll that miss chance if you're trying to shoot me with an arrow. Or if you fancy some of the other investigator talents, you could always take extra talent. Now at this point, you might be thinking, spring attack sounds great and everything, but I've only got 30 feet of movement to work with. Well, with the wonders of chemistry, practically anything is possible. One of my favorite first level extracts is Expeditious Retreat. This gives you an additional 30 feet of movement. This makes it very possible for you to just run up to an opponent, hit them with your sword, and then run away, without provoking an attack of opportunity to boot. You'll also have access to a bunch of helpful buffs, like Bark Skin, Shield, Spider Climb, Bull Strength, all that good stuff. Also, greater invisibility and displacement are great ways to keep yourself from getting hit by anything that doesn't have true sight. But where this character really kind of came into its own for me was with the transmutation stuff. I was particularly fond of Monstrous Physique, and turning into creatures with an ability to fly. I would recommend Harpy, Mothman, or Nightgaunt. Mothman and Nightgaunt have an ability to fly and Blind Sense, both of which can be very helpful. I also had fairly good results with Elemental Body. This allows you to transform into an elemental, and you get some pretty nifty stuff out of that. Finally, Freedom of Movement saved my life more than a few times with this character. Also, if you really want to, there are cure spells in the Alchemist spell list. One of the slight problems with the Investigator is you don't get that many formula per level, so you're probably going to be wanting to pay to add more spells to your formula book. But a fun way around that is blood transcription. I go over that in another video on this channel. And excessive use of that spell sort of ended up turning this character into kind of a vampire demon thing. I hope you've enjoyed this character build from D6damage. If you're interested in more character guides and class analysis, check out D6damage right here on YouTube. Thank you for watching.